Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 14, the working class, we are continuing our topic growth of working class in India, and the subtopic is emergence of working class. With the growth of modern factory industries, the factory workers gradually shaped themselves into a distinct category. The concentration of the working class in the cities near the industrial enterprises was an extremely important factor in the formation of the workers as a class. Similar conditions in the factories and common living conditions made the workers feel that they had similar experience and shared interest and react in similar fashion. In other words, the principal factors underlying the growth and formation of the working mass as a class in India in the later half of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century I bear similarities with the advanced countries of Europe. Hence, the consciousness of being exploited by the capitalist owners of the factory was evident as early as 1888, when workers of Shamnagar jute mills assaulted the manager, Mr. Kindle. That is, the reaction against the exploitation in early phase was marked by riots, affrays, assaults, and physical violence. Side by side with these forms of protest, there were also other forms of struggle characteristics of the working class. Typically, working class actions such as the strike against long hours of work, against wage cuts, against supervisors' extortion were increasing in number, and the tendency to act collectively was also growing. As early as 1879 or 80, there was a threat of the strike in Champadani jute mill against an attempt by the authorities to introduce a new system of single shift, which was unpopular with workers. Presumably because of this strike threat, the proposed system was ultimately abandoned. However, the process of class formation among workers in India was marked by fundamental differences as opposed to their European counterparts. It had far-reaching consequences on the growth of the Indian working class. These differences were: though in Europe also the artisan and craftsmen were dispossessed of their profession, they were not forced out of towns to crowd the village economy. They found employment in large industries as soon as they were dispossessed of their old profession. In India, after the destruction of the traditional handicraft and cottage industry, modern industry did not grow up in its place. The dispossessed artisan and craftsmen were compelled to depend on the village economy and earn a livelihood as landless peasants and agricultural laborers. The gap between destruction of traditional cottage industry and its partial replacement by modern industries was about 2 to 3 generations. The dispossessed artisans and craftsmen lost their age-old technical skill, and when they entered the modern industries, they did so without any initial skills. When the workers, after the long and close association with the agricultural life, entered the modern industries and got transformed into modern workers, they did it in with the full inheritance of the legacy and various superstitions, habits, and customs of agricultural life. There was no opportunity for these men to get out of casteism, racism, and religious superstition of Indian social life and harmful influence of the medieval ideas. They were born as an Indian working class deeply imbued in with obscurantist ideas and backward trends. However, this feature they shared with some of their European counterparts, as well as such as British working class, who too had suffered similar problems. These peculiarities accompanying the birth of Indian workers acted as hindrances to the development of their modern outlook and class consciousness. In fact, the Indian workers were not the only workers characterized by these peculiarities. Rather, these were general characteristics of the working class of the colonies and sub-colonies. Now let us move to the point consolidation of the working class. The end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century was marked by the organized national movement and consolidation of the working class. The national movement, especially in Bengal and Maharashtra, had already assumed a developed form which exerted a great impact on the later national awakening of the entire country. The partition of Bengal in the year 1905 aroused bitter public indignation and gave rise to the mass national upsurge. This political development worked as a favorable condition for the Indian working class too, for moving ahead with its economic struggles and raising them to a higher pitch. The period from the beginning of the century till the outbreak of the First World War was marked with widespread and dogged struggle of the workers, which were not only economic struggles but political struggles also. That is, these struggles led to the laying of the foundation of the first trade unions of the country. Moreover, the turn of the century was also marked by the advance in industrialization with concomitant swelling of the working class in numerical strength. On the eve of the First World War, the capitalist development in India got accelerated. There were increase in the number of joint stock companies. That is, in 1900, the number of joint stock firms was 1360, which in 1907 rose to 2166. It marked the further increase at the beginning of the First World War, when the number of the registered firms stood to 2553. However, with the outbreak of war, the colonial exploitation of India assumed horrible proportions. The government widely used the country's industrial potential for the need of war. At all these Indian bourgeois got opportunities to prosper. The main advantage occurring to Indian bourgeois during the war were less competition from major imperialist powers and a large market for the country-made goods inside and outside the country. War contracts, relatively cheaper raw agricultural materials, low real wages, and higher prices of manufactured goods. But for the working class, it was a tough time. This was because the soaring up of the prices reduced the living standard of working class. While rural areas were affected by the rise of prices of manufactured goods, the town faced higher food prices. The expansion of the Industrialization saw swelling of numbers of factory workers. In 1919, the large-scale industries of the country employed 30,67,000 workers. Of these, 3,06,300 workers were employed in 277 cotton spinning and weaving mills, 1,40,800 in 1940 cottage ginning factories, and 2,76,000 in jute factories and presses. The railway shops employed 1,26,000 workers. The October Socialist Revolution and subsequent sweeping mass and working class struggles formed the background under which the first organization of the Indian working class, called All India Trade Union Congress, was born. In other words, the end of the World War I, the success of the October Revolution, and the first generation crisis of capitalism added new strength to the anti-imperialist struggle of India. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.